Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to kick off a new series. This is going to be mostly just an introduction video talking about what my lab is, what I use it for, and what I run on it. I want to introduce some concepts to you. You can do a little bit of research on your own, understand about what those tools are used for, and essentially how they fit together and things like that. But we're not going to go too deep into the technical realm at this point. I've still got some diagrams that I need to do, and I'm working through getting a license of Visio and stuff like that. So anyway, I may actually go with Glyphy. Anyway, that's beside the point. So what do I use my lab for? Well, so I recently moved into a security engineering role, and I don't want to lose my technical depth in the DevOps space. So I use my lab for learning and training with Kubernetes, as well as the security integrations within Kubernetes, as far as DevSecOps, right? So that's primarily what I use it for. Now, my lab is also used to host a couple of things that I use here at the house. So specifically, I use it to run Pi-hole. I use it to host Home Assistant. I use it to host the integrations for Home Assistant like Mosquito. So that allows me to integrate, for instance, like Ring MQTT, so I can pull in, my information from my cameras and my alarm system, that sort of thing, into my Home Assistant, right? So you can do some things with Ring and Home Assistant out of box, but in order to get camera feeds and things like that, you need to do the Mosquito integration with that. So that's one of the things that I use that for. What I want my lab to be able to do is quickly patch, be able to tear down and rebuild constantly, that sort of thing. So the way I've designed this works for me. It may not work for every use case, right? Kubernetes is vast and broad, and it can be built and designed in many different ways. But for my use case, this is how I use it, and this is what I've designed it after. So I tend to try to separate like management functions and highly secure things like my secrets management, that sort of stuff, from my workloads. So for instance, I want to keep a cluster that I have Vault and Cert Manager and like my Rancher management cluster, that sort of stuff. I try to keep that separate from what I run like Home Assistant on, or what I would run an Apache server Docker container on, or something like that, right? So I tend to try to keep a lot of the back end services like Vault separate from anything that is exposed to the internet, for instance. So that is one of my design concepts in my lab. Is I want to make sure that I have a separate set of infrastructure that manages the internet facing infrastructure. It gives me just a little bit of separation, if you will. So think of it like in network terminology. Think of it as like your privileged networks and your DMZ, or like a quarantine network or something like that. So the way I have my network here at the house designed, I have a bunch of different VLANs that serve different purposes. So that is that's one of the things that we'll be going into as well. Now, I use Ansible to control a vast majority of my management tasks here. So all of the servers that I build, all of the K3s clusters that I use, those are all provisioned with Ansible. There's currently a bug with Rancher where Rancher will not deploy K3s on ARM, and I think it actually is the same for RKE2. But essentially, there's a different set of containers that run on the ARM architecture, and Rancher has a bug where it's not able to differentiate that right now. So it tries to install the x86 containers on your ARM system. So obviously that doesn't work. So I just provision it with Ansible. So high level, some of the tools that I would look into if I were you as part of this is you look into, obviously, Kubernetes. K3s in particular is what I'm using. So that's a Rancher version of very lightweight Kubernetes. I would look into Rancher itself. So Rancher has a tool called Rancher, right, that does management of Kubernetes clusters. So I use that to, for instance, do deployments of a GitOps repo on my Kubernetes cluster, so that if I need to make a change to anything, I just put it in a Git repo, basically, and then it will go make it so, right? We'll go into some of that too. So take a look at those. Look at HashiCorp Vault. We'll be using that. If you want to do anything with like Home Assistant or what have you, there's a significant amount of things out there for Home Assistant. If you're going to be doing anything internet facing, I would recommend that you check out Cert Manager. That allows you to essentially reach out and get Acme certs from providers like Let's Encrypt. It manages your certificate life cycles for you, so that's really nice. The load balancer that I use an L2 load balancer called Metal LB. So that is something that I would certainly take a look at as well. We'll be using that. We'll also be using Nginx. One thing to note, there are two versions of Nginx. So you have the kind of the Kubernetes, community version of Nginx, and you have a non-community version of Nginx. We'll be using the community version of that. It seems to be more supported for the stuff that I do with it. So that's another thing. We'll also be using a DevOps methodology called Git Ops. So Git Ops allows you to essentially take a Git repository of manifest files and configuration for your cluster, and it essentially will. You can do it a couple of different ways, but in this case, I'm going to be using Rancher to take that data and then apply it to my production cluster, right? So essentially, like if I want to deploy, let's say, Home Assistant, right? Well, I'll have a manifest file, and that's going to contain the service, the container, the ingresses, that sort of stuff for that particular product. And by putting that in a Git repository, which I'm going to be calling like PaaS config or something like that, so platform as a service, which is what Kubernetes is, right? So I'll be calling, I'll essentially be dumping my metadata into specific folders inside a Git repo for this. And then Rancher will take that data and apply it to the cluster for me. Now, I know this works because I'm doing it right now, and I've been doing it for close to a year. So definitely check out GitOps. And what I like about it is, for instance, let's say that I want to change the version of Home Assistant that I'm running. All I have to do is pull my repo down, change a number in my manifest file, check that in, commit it, and it will just go ahead and redeploy Home Assistant. And it will do it in like, a managed fashion so that you don't actually have any downtime either, right? So, it'll do like a blue-green deployment, basically, like stand up the new one, tear the other one down. Now you can define how you want to do those upgrades and things like that. That's all fully customizable, but I'm going to try to keep it as out of box as possible, because what I like to do is just rebuild my cluster for patching, right? So, one of the things that seems to come up a lot is, how do you manage the life cycle of your Kubernetes cluster, and how do you manage the life cycle of the node that Kubernetes runs on? I rather than patching a system, I rather just rebuild it, right? So that creates some challenges. If you're going to rebuild your entire Kubernetes cluster, if you aren't using persistent storage, then you won't have any of that state. You won't have any of the data that you had. So we'll be using my Synology NAS as persistent storage. So we'll be using essentially persistent volume claims and persistent volumes for that. So that's another thing that we'll be talking about as we go through the series. Anyway, that's a lot of information to throw at you right off the bat. But I didn't want to leave you all hanging, and I know it's been a couple of weeks since I dropped a new video. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm doing some diagramming, making sure that I have everything ready to go. I need to record some content, and I need to get that out to you. So over the next week or so, I'm hoping to have the first real meaty technical video. Anyway, so stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. There's quite a few new subscribers now, which is great. We're picking up steam. We've got several new people that have joined the Discord server. I encourage you to do that as well. We talk about 3D printing, Kubernetes, DevOps, all sorts of stuff. Pretty much anything you want to talk about, open forum. Anyway, yeah, I think that's all I've got for you today. So, like I said, hopefully I'll get some new content out here in the next couple of days to a week. I really appreciate you stopping by. I hope you stick around for this series. I think it's going to be really informative. It's going to be, certainly fun for me, going through my lab, showing all of you the stuff that I build. So, thanks. Take care.